Welcome to all the fanfare. My name is Eric Pierce. Today I'm flying solo, but that's alright because we're talking about Top Gun. It's a movie I know very well, and I think I can cover this one pretty well on my own. So I will just have a conversation by myself to myself. But before we get to all that, just wanted to remind you, if you're a fan of the show, make sure you leave a review, leave a rating. Even more so, support the pod, $3 a month. That will get you access to all sorts of exclusive articles. You can find all that at allthefanfare.com. Now on to this movie. The year was 1986. The Cold War still raging on. Enter Top Gun, a movie in which the U.S. is at odds with an unnamed country that flies Soviet MiGs and is clearly the USSR, but is never named as such. Why are the tensions so high? Is blowing up this unnamed country's fighters the opening salvos of World War III? As Harrison Ford once said about Star Wars, when Mark Hamill was pointing out some of the logical inconsistencies with the movie, it ain't that kind of movie, kid. And now there's Top Gun. Top Gun's a popcorn movie. It's a movie in which the hero overcomes solely because he's the most reckless, which is sort of peak America. For the longest time, I thought this was an R-rated movie, and it was only until recently that I realized it's actually PG. I guess I think just because of the language, maybe? The swearing? I don't know. For some reason, I thought it was rated R, but it's not. It's actually PG. But it has a sizable impact on me. I saw this when I was 10 or so for the first time. We had it on VHS. My dad and stepmom had a copy. And one summer, I just watched it repeatedly. I probably watched it basically like every day. Like it was one of those situations where your parents leave for the day. Both of them would leave for the day for work. And then you kind of have the run of the place to yourself for all hours. And so you had chores and things. But other than that, you had time to yourself. And so I watched a lot of Top Gun that summer, to the point that I could recite the entire film from memory. I was very proud of this, and I used a lot of the jargon from the movie in my everyday speech, which I still do. But my dad wasn't too impressed with the fact that I had memorized the entire movie, when he overheard me telling my younger brother, "If you screw up just this much, I'll have you flying a cargo plane full of rubber dog shit out of Hong Kong." He kind of scolded me, but at the same time, there was a glint in his eye. I think he secretly thought it was funny because it is kind of funny when kids swear. One of the first things I think of when I think of this movie is the music, which is maybe unique in that, other than maybe Footloose, I don't know if there's any other movie I'd say that I think of the music before I think of anything else in the movie. But for me, the music is always it's like right there with probably Tom Cruise and Jets. But yeah, the music is iconic, and to the point that when the movie starts, we're just getting these cinematics of jets on a aircraft carrier and all the guys that kind of scurry about on the aircraft carrier doing their hand signals and stuff as the planes take off and land. I typically, and all this is occurring with the title sequence. So, and you're getting, names of the actors, the names of the grip, like all these people you don't really care about. They're getting the names on the screen. I typically would fast forward through that because I don't care about any of that. I just want to get to the story, but there's no fast forwarding through this for these opening cinematics. Not here. No, sir. Part of that is the cinematics themselves, just watching the ships take off and land against dawn sky. Part of that too is the Top Gun theme. And it's just so iconic. I just love it. And then right from that, jump right into Highway to the Danger Zone, and we're off and running. And yeah, I just love the soundtrack of this movie. It's amazing. And yes, I own it. More than once, I've just thrown on the soundtrack to Top Gun and listened to it because it elicits things that you don't even get out of the movie, some of the thrills. But yeah, the music's just great. Highway to the Danger Zone obviously is an all-time song. Kenny Loggins was just kind of out of his mind. He also had Playing with the Boys. That's another banger. Just in the zone in this movie. Take My Breath Away. They play this like 5 times in the movie. It's kind of like the theme song for the love story between Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis. and I don't know. They play his songs. It might even be more than 5 times. I honestly lost count. It's too in your face so much. It's like, yeah, we get it. Like, okay, we get what's going on. It's kind of ironic that it won an Oscar for best original song. That kind of hurts me a little bit. Of all the songs in this movie, how is it not Highway to Danger Zone that's winning Oscar glory? That kind of bothers me. Justice for Kenny Loggins. By the way, of all the stressful things you could attempt in your life, I think trying to land a jet fighter on an aircraft carrier would probably be one of the most. That looks terrifying. And in fact, I remember there was a Top Gun video game for the original Nintendo, and it was trying to land the plane is brutal. I don't know that I ever successfully landed the plane. Like, I think level one, I never progressed past the first level because I could never actually land my stupid plane. I would just crash and burn, land in the ocean, blow up on the side of the aircraft carrier, whatever. It's basically impossible. And in real life, it probably is too. So hats off to the guys doing that. Top Gun is a high school sports movie. And if that sounds bizarre, well, you hang with me for a minute, I will explain. But this movie has far more in common with something like The Karate Kid than it does with a war movie like Platoon or even something like Iron Eagle. If we just look at what happens in this movie, arriving at Top Gun feels like someone attending a new high school. In this case, it's Maverick. He's kind of the new kid, and even though they're all actually new to Top Gun, they're all there for for Top Gun, this 8-week program, whatever. It feels like Maverick's kind of the new kid, the one on the outside looking in. You've got Iceman, who's the popular jock slash bully, but actually turns out he's not really the bully. He's just the Maverick's antagonist. He has some valid gripes against Maverick, which we're going to get into, but yeah, Iceman, he's kind of the antagonist going up against Maverick. He fills the archetype of the jock slash bully. And then, like any other high school movie, look at this. I have a list of high school movie things that pop up in this movie. You've got locker room scenes. You have gym scenes, which I'm calling the volleyball scene a gym scene. You have classroom scenes. You have pranks. You have disappointed and pissed off administrators. You have threats of expulsion. That's just things I came off the top of my head. And yeah, it's just as I was watching this, just kind of the beats that I was observing with the movie this time around. That's what I kept coming back to is like, yeah, man, this is really a high school movie about sports more than anything else, like structurally and just some of the set pieces that occur along the way. A lot has also been made about the movie's homoerotic elements. I don't really feel the need to pile on because it's not really it's an accurate observation, but I don't feel like it's that fresh. Like people have been saying this forever. It's definitely there if you go looking for it, or even if you just have eyes and you're just like, why are all these half naked dudes glistening? Like, what's that about? But I think it's not thematically accurate to call it a homoerotic movie. I think it is a love story. No, not a Tom Cruise and Kelly McGillis love story. There's no chemistry between the two. Their love scene is 75% tonguing each other, which was cool when you're like 10. I've never French kissed anybody, but otherwise it's just kind of gross watching Tom Cruise eat her face. It's not a Maverick and Goose love story. They do have an iconic bromance, but it's a side dish to the main course. This is a romantic movie about fighter aircraft and the men who fly them. That's the true love story. It absolutely and totally works, and that's why I love the movie so much. And the movie actually falls on its face when it doesn't involve men in cockpits, which maybe that's another homoerotic tell, I don't know, but at the same time, this movie is outstanding when it involves fighter jets and people flying them, and otherwise it's just kind of ho-hum and boring. It's a movie that is better in my memory than it is in real life, I'll just say. Unlike something like Back to the Future, which remains amazing with every watch, maybe even gets better upon rewatch. It's maybe in my opinion, it's like the only perfect movie, Back to the Future. Top Gun is not that. And in fact, Top Gun gets substantially less good once Goose dies. And that's, oh, by the way, spoilers. But, and that has less to do with Goose than just how the tenor of the film changes. It's kind of was this, yeah, hoorah kind of energy, and it immediately pivots into something somber, somber scenes, somber music. The performances here are not that great to carry a movie like that, so you're immediately wanting to get back to the fighter jets, but now Maverick's afraid to fly because he got his guy killed accidentally. And yeah, even though I enjoy Anthony Edwards' performance as Goose, it's he is not the linchpin in the movie. It's just that the movie makes this right turn after this tragic event, understandably, but at the same time, the movie gets a lot less interesting from there on. It kind of recovers in the climactic scene, but it's still never quite the same. And so I prefer the first half, first 2/3 of this movie, basically, compared to everything that comes after it. The fighter jet scenes are so well done. Everything else just pales in comparison. And yeah, like I said earlier, Top Gun was an amazing movie when I was 10. It had jets, it had French kissing, it had dudes playing volleyball, dudes being bros, dudes hanging out in their underwear. Like, yeah, that looks awesome. As an adult, I'm kind of just here for the jets at this point. Like, just show me the fighter jets, show me things going fast, and yeah, making their combat moves and stuff. Like that's what I'm here for. That's what this movie is, and that's what they give us in the sequel. So at least we have that to look forward to. I mentioned the volleyball. This movie glistens literally. It is a sweaty movie. I think you'd be hard pressed to find any movie that has more sweating than this one does. Everyone in this movie is sweating their balls off. It's even if they don't have balls, they're sweating them off. There's the radio operator on the carrier who's sweating like he accidentally pushed the fire all nukes button. Every pilot in the classroom scenes are just dripping with sweat. The admiral who's staying there chomping his cigar while stuff's going on, even when it's just training stuff, he's sweating his bald head off. The pilots are sweating. It's a little wonder that Slider stinks. He's been sweating constantly for days on end. And can you even imagine the body odor on these aircraft carriers or in these training sessions? Everyone's just sweating their minds off. They've got to stink to high heaven. I do have to wonder, is there no air conditioning here? Like, what is going on? This Top Gun takes place in California. How is no one prepared for this? It kind of baffles my mind. There's at least one scene where all the pilots are kind of sitting around half naked with towels draped around their waist, or maybe not even that, just in their tidy whities. And they're just sweating like they're in a freaking sauna. They're just in like a locker room, but they're just sweating their balls off. And there, even though there's plenty of towels around, everyone's just sitting there dripping. Like, you have to wonder at some point, like, is this some kind of macho competition thing? Like, they're trying to see who can sweat the most, or sweat the best, or sweat the most manly, or is it like who can do the best job of sweating and acting totally like comfortable and normal? Is like, this is not a thing. But you will never see anyone like wipe their brow or anything. They just sit there and the sweat just runs off their face, down their chest, whatever. They just pretend it's not happening. Like, this might be TMI, but I sweat from my head. Like, I that's like the only place I sweat really, which is cool. But at the same time, it's not cool because then if I get a little bit hot, all of a sudden, like, I just got sweat running down my face, like I'm nervous as heck, when in fact I'm not. And it's super uncomfortable. Like, when you get sweat in your eyes, it's the worst thing ever. So I'm constantly like wiping my brow, and to the point where like if I work out or something, I need a towel or something to wipe my face, because otherwise I'm gonna be crying about all the sweat in my eyes. So in real life, if you're sweating that much, you're wiping that off because it's uncomfortable, and minimally. And again, if it gets into your eyes or something, it's not a fun time. So it cracks me up that no one cares about the sweat. Everyone's just sweating, but it's like this unobserved, unremarked upon thing, and no one even reacts to it. It just happens. I do wonder if there's some kind of thematic element at play here. Like, why did director Tony Scott choose to make everyone look like they're just dripping sweat, like in every freaking scene? Every scene. Like, if you watch this movie, you will not find one scene where no one is sweating. Everyone is sweating in this movie. It's ridiculous. And of course, there is the volleyball scene, which I'm just going to comment on briefly. It is an iconic scene. It's a fun scene. I love watching it as a kid because it's just fun watching dudes compete. I'm an easy get on that front. I like sports. Even as an adult, it's a fun scene to watch. Although I start to question things like, why is this happening? The volleyball scene is just sepia tinted, glinting manliness, even though this is set in California, and I'm pretty sure I saw desert at points, so it's freaking hot here. For some reason, Goose is the only one wearing shorts. The Ice and Slider are wearing like sweatpants, and which, okay, I guess, but even more baffling, Maverick's got on freaking jeans. Like, what is going on? I can't even imagine the swamp ass he's dealing with. Does he not own any shorts? Like, what is. Maybe he didn't pack any shorts. Maybe he didn't think he's going to have free time to do stuff like volleyball because he was going to be locked in on this Top Gun thing. I can get along with that. I can understand that. But it still seems like only a psycho would play beach volleyball in the California heat in the summer in freaking jeans and then rush off to go on your date with this hot older lady that you're trying to get with. And not only does he go to Charlie's house for this dinner date, he has the gall to ask her if he could use her shower just real quick because he knows he's ripe down there. And she says no because that's freaking crazy. But this is actually the perfect segue to talk about Maverick because you really can't divorce Maverick from this movie. This movie is Maverick. They're one and the same. It is interesting. This is a star-making performance for Cruise. Easily one of his most iconic performances, his most iconic roles, certainly. I think for me, when I think of like my top 5 Tom Cruise roles, Top Gun / Maverick, that's probably number 1 with a gun, number 1 with a bullet. Jerry Maguire's up there. Few Good Men, obviously Mission Impossible, and then I think my 5th would maybe be something like Collateral, which is a bit of a different role for him, a departure. He's a bad guy. He's got silver hair, but great role, great performance. Yeah, but Top Gun stands head and shoulders above the rest of those for me, which is funny because as a performance, it doesn't like do a lot, but it's just it's such an iconic role, and I think it's well suited for his strengths, and he just, he looks great in it, and it's the movie that put him on the map. When I think about Tom Cruise movies, this movie that I picture, and specifically kind of his look in this movie, the white t-shirt with the leather bomber jacket and aviators it's just timeless. He makes it look great. He pulls it off. I will say his teeth are a supporting character in this movie because he's flashing those choppers constantly. And there's some big old teeth. Let's just say he has a toothy grin. I did think it was interesting. Some of the names that were considered for the role of Maverick include Emilio Estevez, Patrick Swayze, Sean Penn, Rob Lowe, Charlie Sheen, Michael J. Fox, and Ralph Macchio. Kind of a who's who of like young 1980s actors. Of that list, I think Swayze is probably the only one who could have pulled it off. Maybe Charlie Sheen as well. I think I do love Michael J. Fox. He's just too cute. Rob Lowe's too harmless. Sean Penn and Emilio Estevez are just the wrong vibe, and Ralph Macchio is just all wrong. He would have been a disaster. I just picture freaking Daniel San in the cockpit. That would have been a disastrous movie. I kind of want to see it now, though, because I think it would be so bad. But yeah, I think this movie is the one that really put Cruise on the map. He did Risky Business a couple years earlier than this. I'll be honest, that movie doesn't have a lot of stock with me because I was like too young when it came out and didn't really care about it. Like coming of age thing, I wasn't of age. I was like 3 or 4 something when it came out. So that movie means like nothing to me, but this movie does. And for me, this is the first Tom Cruise movie I ever saw, and probably remains his most iconic performance. I think at least one of them. He's been in a lot of movies, obviously, and lately he kills it with Mission Impossible, certainly. But for me, this is probably his most iconic performance, his most Tom Cruise role, Tom Cruise performance. Growing up is realizing that Maverick is not really the hero of the movie. In fact, the hero is probably Iceman. Maverick is dangerous. He's a selfish jerk. doesn't respect the word no, probably will get you killed. And he introduces himself by his call sign, which seems like a red flag to me. Like, I wonder what Freud would say about something like that. He follows a lady who he just met into the ladies' room after she said, "No, I'm not interested in hanging out with you. I got this older guy I want to hang out with." Follows her into the ladies' room, stalkerish much. By the way, going up to a girl in a bar with a microphone and breaking out to a song right out of the blue has got to be the bravest move in the movie. Probably also the cockiest. It's just red flags galore when we first get to meet Maverick. But I do have to say, if we roll back from those things, he does have a really effective introduction. We get that scene where Cougar and Maverick are kind of dancing with the MIGs, and we're seeing why he's known as Maverick, because he's doing things like hitting the brakes, fly right by, which I don't know if that's possible in aviation. I think it's probably not, but it's still freaking cool. I love it. It gives him the bird. All that stuff's awesome. He chooses to defy orders and go back to save Cougar, or at least help him get back to the aircraft carrier. We're seeing why he's known as Maverick, and then shortly after that, we get the litany of reasons that he's on a short leash as the admiral just rips into him about everything he just did, and then again the litany of things he has done previously. So it's a really effective introduction of the character, and then as we get to know him, we realize that he's a bit of a problem. Maverick is driven to escape the shadow of his old man, a fighter pilot who did something so bad that people doubt his kid like 20 years later. And that may be the most incredulous part of this movie, which is really saying something. But the crazy thing about all of that is the truth of the matter, like what really went down with Maverick's dad, is really a lot of to do about nothing. And it's just the geopolitical stuff in this movie makes no sense, and that's just more of the same. But I think the whole mystique of Maverick's dad, it's just there to give him. They like to talk about. There's a line in this movie about, oh, you're like competing against the ghost of something when you're up there, and I think they just do that just to give Maverick an edge, make him sound cool, give him a reason for being like on the edge and being so dangerous and stuff, other than the fact that he's just freaking psychopath. Besides Cruise's star-making performance, Top Gun remains timeless for how the lingo has invaded my everyday dialogue. I say things like negative Ghost Rider, the pattern is full. I've said that numerous times and even put it in writing because I don't know, I just love it. It's just a great saying. Your ego is writing checks your body can't cash. That's another timeless one. You can be my wingman anytime. Classic. And bonus points if the person responds appropriately. One thing I absolutely love about this movie is the call signs. They're so evocative, and in the case of like Maverick and Iceman, they inform their character, and to some extent, you with especially with Maverick, you can question like where does the call sign end and the person begin. But just in general, I love the call signs. They kind of remind me of how guys, specifically, not to genderize, but when I was in high school, guys referred to each other by their last names, and it just reminds me of that, the whole call sign thing. I did a piece some time ago where I ranked all of the call signs in Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick. I'll drop that in the show notes, but here's the top 5 call signs from this movie alone. I'll go in reverse order. Number 5, Cougar. Just sounds great. Even though Cougar in this movie's kind of he's not a great pilot. I don't want to call him a wuss, but he's not a great pilot. Cool call sign. I got Maverick 4. Merlin number 3. I love the whimsiness of it. The fact that it's different because all the other ones are like animals and things like that. They're fierce. Merlin he's a wizard, obviously, but it just is a cool call sign. I got Iceman number 2, and then my top one is Viper. I think Viper just implies a degree of like quickness and deadliness that I think is really fitting for fighter pilots. In closing, I think this movie has a lot to say about masculinity I think a lot of that's intentional, but some of it's maybe subtext that just finds its way into the film. Obviously, there's some of the toxic masculinity that we see with Maverick's behavior, specifically as it relates to Charlie, the Kelly McGillis character, specifically early on in the film, the way he's pursuing her and things. There's also the way the pilots position themselves against each other and kind of that jockeying that kind of always happens when you've got a bunch of alpha males together. They're trying to establish the pecking order. And I think into the military kind of invites a degree of masculinity. And so we see that in this movie. But I also think if you talk about some of the homoerotic elements, how it's kind of celebrating masculinity for masculinity's sake, and the fact that you just have guys hanging out half naked and nobody thinks anything of it, and you've got the beach volleyball scene, and you can even say, you know, the aircraft is a metaphor for a man's vitality, his virility. We've got the fact that Maverick is seen kind of as an extension of his father, to the point that what his father did casts shade on Maverick and informs how people see Maverick and probably how Maverick sees himself. And then also, probably the most damning thing I think in my mind is how the film treats Maverick in the wake of Goose's death. We get the scene where Maverick in his tidy whities, sort of shaving his face, just kind of staring soulfully into his own eyes. And Tom Skerritt, aka Viper, comes in to inform him that Goose is dead, and then basically 30 seconds later tells him to shake it off. And he spends the rest of the movie trying to get Maverick back in the saddle. When Maverick sort of admits defeat and says he can't do it, he's not going to do it, and he kind of just chooses to quit Top Gun and leaves. He goes to the airport. Charlie chases him down, finds him there, and just accuses him of quitting. And there's no sympathy, there's no empathy. Everyone just sees him as a tool, a weapon, a pilot, and the humanity of him is essentially not in consideration at all. It really stuck out to me this time around that, yeah, Maverick isn't given any time or space to grieve, and no one really cares that this happened to him. And then probably the most sympathetic person to Maverick is, well, Goose's wife is one, but then Iceman himself, he apologized for what happened. And yeah, I just think it's interesting what the movie is saying about masculinity and how when you get knocked down, you just need to get right back up and there's no time for grieving. Maybe that makes sense in a military setting when you're at war, certainly, but in this case, they're not at war unless they're about to start a war by shooting down these MiGs. There's no war, so it's just it's interesting, and maybe this is looking, 2024 eyes looking back to the 80s and seeing the kind of that lack of sensitivity and that kind of stop crying and get up kind of mentality. But yeah, that's kind of stuck out to me this time around that I never picked up on before. Maybe that means I'm getting more mature. I don't know. That's about it for this episode. This might end up being our shortest episode yet, which could mean one of two things. A, when I talk to myself about movies, I have a lot less to say than when I have conversations with other people. And that's not surprising because I think conversations with other people are more fruitful and certainly more fun than talking to myself like this. I guess the other thing maybe too is, yeah, there's Top Gun is a movie with fighter pilots, and it's about, proving who's the best of the best. And there's some things you can say about masculinity and things, but at the same time, it's kind of a skin deep. It's a good looking film, it's a gorgeous film, but at the same time, it is what it is. And so we're going to leave it off here. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Come back next week. I don't yet know what we're talking about next week. Could be fantasy football. My brother and I are having discussions about getting together to record an episode about fantasy football, which I think some of you will enjoy. Some of you will just choose to skip. Otherwise, I might be doing the Karate Kid, or maybe Star Wars with a friend. So come back next week. Until next time, peace.